It's a great pleasure to welcome him here at Glenrothes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tommy Sheridan.
Thanks very much for that, Craig. Can I just say at the outset, folks, that I feel as though I should be getting a wee badge soon, an honorary Fiferian, if there's such a term. This is my 6th visit to Fife, and while I was waiting to get directions to hear from Kirkcaldy, I fixed up another meeting for Cowdenbeath on the 13th of August, and I have to go to Oakley in September, so that'll be 8 meetings in Fife in the course of this campaign. And can I say, it's been a great pleasure to come to every one of those meetings, because I've always received a very polite and warm welcome, and I think it's very important that we recognise just how critical and crucial the area of Fife is in relation to this vote, because it's areas like this that are going to decide whether we win this referendum or not. I don't usually, by way of starting meetings, refer to the Daily Pravda, Daily Record, the Pravda for the No campaign, but I thought I would have to refer to it today because it has got a wonderful contradiction in it. It's got the usual story on its front page, and it's a no from Simon. Some of you may not have seen it yet, but you're probably going to change your vote now because Simon Cowell is encouraging you to vote no. And he's just one of the long list of people who have been wheeled out recently. I don't know if you've noticed it, but we had the Chinese Premier recently. I can't even remember his name. I don't know if you can, but he's been brought in here. I don't know what he knows about Scotland and anything to do with the referendum, but he's telling you have to vote no. We've had Hillary Clinton. She's going to be standing for the President of America, and she's telling you to vote no. We've had Obama, current President, and he's telling you to vote no. And it's going to be interesting on Friday, isn't it? Because Obama's telling you to vote no to independence for Scotland. So by that logic, surely on Friday, Independence Day for America, when they get their independence in 1776, you've got to expect that Obama's going to announce on Friday that they've given up their independence and they're coming back under the tutelage of Britain on Friday. Because of course, what we should say to Obama is, wait a wee minute, if independence is good enough for America, surely it's good enough for Scotland as well. That's what I think we should be saying to Obama. We've also had John Major. Remember him? Ex-Premier. He's been brought out now, telling us doom and gloom if you vote no. I don't know why they brought him out. We never listened to him when he was a Premier. Why we would listen to him now, I don't know. We've had Gordon Brown, someone from these parts, as they say, Kingdom of Fife. The old Gordon's been brought out, and we're going to have Mary him in a minute as we get into this speech. But Gordon's telling you, no, don't vote yes, because there'll be all sorts of problems if you do. And of course, you've got to question why it is so many of these people are now being mobilised. There's been a wee bit, maybe, of a backfiring going on, actually. I'll tell you a wee story. I better watch because we're being recorded tonight, but I'll probably get into trouble for this story. However, I'll tell it anyway. I met with my QC a week past Friday. And my QC, I'm not going to give his name, but my QC is a well-known no supporter. And when I met him, he said he's having second thoughts. I thought, brilliant. I says, what's happened? Have you been watching some of the videos on YouTube? He says, no. I says, have you been reading some of the literature on the Yes Campaign website? No. Well, has somebody been speaking to you, convincing you otherwise? No. I says, well, why are you having second thoughts? He says, well, if the Pope's saying vote no, then I'm having second thoughts about voting no. That's right, they've mobilised the Pope now as well. He's saying vote no. No names, no pack draw. Brothers and sisters, I've got to say to you, Isn't it interesting that there are so many people now being mobilised by the British establishment to come into this debate? This is a debate, by the way, 6-7 months ago, we were just barking up the wrong tree. We were effectively letting off air into the wind. We had no chance. Now, they're mobilising everybody they can get their hands on to come out and tell you no. Why? Because it is very, very close. I've called it squeaky bum time for the British establishment. Squeaky bum time. Because they know now, with all of the opinion polls, and even the rigged opinion polls. I remember reading the Daily Pravda a couple of weeks ago, going up to Inverness to speak at a meeting, and I'm reading this story, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, beauty, this is a great story, this will be all over the place, this story, because this was a story about the opinion poll they've had for 6 months in a row, and it was in the Daily Record, and it said, the gap between yes and no is now at its lowest. There's only 4 percentage points. 4 percentage points between yes and no. But when voters are asked, if you think David Cameron's going to win the next election, how are you going to vote? And it turns into a 5 percentage point lead for the yes campaign. And I'm reading that and I'm saying, yeah, beauty. This will be all over the press now. This will be on the TV. This is going to be dead encouraging for people. And then, of course, for the next 3 days, all we got was Twittergate and how J.K. Rowling had apparently been abused on Twitter, and it was a massive big story. Now, by the way, it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but somebody suggested, because J.K. Rowling had donated £1 million to the No campaign, that you should get all the Harry Potter books together, put them in the Tory HQ and burn a lot of them. Now, I don't, some people laugh, some people don't, but is it really worthy of the front page headlines it was getting? Is it really worthy of a police investigation with everything that's going on in the world? But what it did do is it deflected attention for the real story. The real story is, it is now neck and neck. Brothers and sisters, it's so close. It's so close that I've got to say to each and every one of you out there who are already yes supporters, you're very welcome tonight. This meeting isn't just for those that are undecided or those that are going to be voting no and want to hear the arguments. This meeting is for you who are already voting yes as well, because I don't want you leaving tonight's meeting just as a yes voter. I want you leaving tonight's meeting as a yes ambassador, a yes campaigner, a yes crusader. That's why it's important for you to be here tonight, even if you've already made up your mind. But do you know what it means, these polls? It means that every yes voter in Scotland now has to convince one more person. One more person. And we're going to win. That's how close it is now, brothers and sisters. That's why they're getting the Chinese Premier, the President of America, Hillary Clinton, and even the Pope involved in this campaign, because they are frightened that the British establishment is about to lose a vote that they have invested millions in, that they've deployed all of the forces at their disposal to demolish your arguments. You think of the media. We'll have more about this later on. Think of how biased the media has been. How they've promoted everything from a no point of view, denigrated the yes campaign. Every single wee glitch, every single wee argument is blown out of proportion as far as yes is concerned, but no can get away with telling you lies. They published, I don't know if you've seen it, they published figures. Apparently to set up independence, it's going to cost £7 billion. And they quoted an economist. The economist said, what are you talking about? I never said that. I never said that. It doesn't even cost £1 billion. You're lucky if it costs a few £100 million. All right, well, here's this other economist, and he says it's going to cost billions of pounds. And the other economist goes on to Twitter and said, no, I never said that. Can you imagine, just for a moment, can you imagine that the Yes campaign was caught telling lies twice? It would be all over the place. But most of you probably are sitting there saying, oh, I didn't know that, oh, I never heard that story. Because it was the No campaign that was caught telling lies twice. You're not hearing much about that. It is so biased, so one-sided, and yet it's neck and neck. We can win this vote on the 18th of September, brothers and sisters. It's within our grasp. Before I give you some of the arguments about what this referendum's all about, let's clarify right at the outset what it's not about. This vote on 18th of September has got nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do, with whether you like, loathe, or hate Alex Salmond. Absolutely nothing to do with that. This vote has got nothing to do with whether you're a supporter, a member, or you don't like the SNP. SNP have played a role in keeping independence on the political agenda for decades. Well done to them. But on the 18th of September, brothers and sisters, you are not voting for who it is going to run Scotland. On the 18th of September, you're voting to have the right to decide who runs Scotland. That's what the 18th of September is all about. Right now, you don't have that right. That's the reality. Whether you like Alex Salmond or any other politician, it doesn't matter. This vote's bigger than one political party. It's bigger than one politician or any other politician. This vote is about the future of Scotland. That's what it's all about. This vote, brothers and sisters, is about freedom. Freedom. And some people say, oh, Tommy, come on. Is that no a bit Braveheartish? Is that no a bit Mel Gibsonish? You know, is it no tartan clad and Bannockburn and all the rest of it? No. No, because I'll tell you what. We may not be in shackles and chains. We may not be in handcuffs. By the way, I know a thing or two about being in handcuffs. Just in case there are any gutter journalists here tonight. None of it for kinky reasons, by the way. We may not be locked up, and I know a thing or two about being locked up and all. Brothers and sisters, being unfree comes in many shapes and sizes. Why is this vote about freedom? I'll tell you why it's about freedom. Because since 1951, this country of Scotland has rejected the creed of greed that runs through the Tories like a stick of rock. This country's rejected the privatisation, neoliberal economic agenda that dictates the way to motivate the rich is cut their taxes and give them bigger bonuses. But the way to motivate the poor is to cut their wages and make them work longer. We've rejected that creed of greed since 1951. And yet, since 1951, this country has had to endure 35 years of Tory governments that we never voted for. That's a lack of freedom. And on the 18th of September, you've got the freedom to decide. Each and every one of you. You've got the freedom to decide. Never, ever again will our country be governed by a Tory government. That's where you've got the freedom to decide. You've got kids, you've got grandkids. You've got a country to think about. And you've got a future to think about. Freedom. Freedom to decide, for instance, that there are certain services that are so important, that are so valuable, that they should never, ever be allowed to be run privately, for profit, for greed. Things like the health service. Can I say to you here tonight, without fear of contradiction, if Scotland votes no on the 18th of September,
our health service will be private within 10 years. Why? Because of the Health and Social Care Act, which most of you probably haven't heard of. It was passed by the Westminster Parliament in 2012. It's a 455-page bill. First 2 pages of it removes the legal commitment that has existed for 60 years for the Secretary of State of Health in England to provide free and universal health care to every citizen in England. The other 453 pages of that bill describe the creation of a new private internal market for the provision of health care in England. Based not on universality, based on private insurance. Modelled on the United States of America. Modelled in a country where if you're not well and you go to hospital, they don't reach for your pulse, they reach for your wallet. That's what they're introducing here and now in England. 60 different firms have been invited to bid for the provision of healthcare services in England. Companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, accountants. Companies like Virgin, companies like the Royal Bank of Scotland, companies like Circle Cement, pals of the Tories, been invited to bid for the drip roast of £112 billion budget for the health service. Go online, don't listen to me if you don't believe me. Go online, look up Professor Allyson, Pollock, Professor of Health Economics. Look at her April speech in particular in London, where she describes the process of the dismantling of the health service in England and how it's now reduced to no more than a logo. A logo, that's all it is. These people make the point within 5 years of Scotland voting no, our health service will be unrecognisable. Within 10 years, our health service will be private. Why? Because in Westminster, if we vote no, if we show them that we don't have the guts, we don't have the courage to take our own destiny in our own hands, do you honestly think they're going to continue to give us the money to run a public health service when they've privatised their own? Not on your Nelly. Private healthcare is what they're introducing in England, and that's what they'll force here in Scotland as well. And by the way, don't just leave it at health. You've got the freedom to save the health service. You've also got the freedom to save your public education service. I don't know how many of you have got kids that are at the age that they're going into higher education. If they're thinking of going to university to try and better themselves, to try and get some qualifications, in Scotland they can go to university and they don't have upfront tuition fees. In England, £9,000. £9,000 up front. Well, I don't know how many of you, if your kids are going to uni, I don't know how many you can afford £9,000. But by the way, that's just the start. The estimate is that will be £15,000 within 3 years, average, upfront tuition fees. Do you think, if we vote no, that Westminster's going to continue to give us enough money to keep our education service public and that we don't charge kids to go to university when they're charging down in England? Do you honestly think that? Brothers and sisters, you've got the freedom to save the health service. You've got the freedom to save education with a yes vote. I'll tell you what else you've got the freedom for, and this is why I wanted to bring the Daily Record into this. Unusual for me to bring them into it. But there's an editorial in here. I would ask you, each and every one of you, to read this editorial because it makes the case better than I've ever read for a long time for a yes vote. Because it reports on the committee that has now looked into the revamping of Trident nuclear weapons. They've decided, this committee, that Britain, by the way, we're all in austerity, public service cuts, we've all to pull in our belts, we're all in it together. Remember that, I'm going to repeat that a few times during the night's meeting. We're all in it together. We're skint, we can't afford to invest in housing. We can't afford to invest in health and education. But by the way, they're recommending a new generation of nuclear weapons, £130 billion. £130,000 million. We're asking. But that's the new generation of nuclear weapons that's been recommended. Westminster's going to vote for it. By the way, what are nuclear weapons? 1996, the International Court of Justice, that's the court where all the countries of the world meet. And they discussed nuclear weapons. By the way, it took them a decade to get the discussion going because all the big countries didn't want to discuss nuclear weapons. Eventually they had the discussion. And they examined the Geneva Convention, the rules of engagement in war. And they said, well, under the Geneva Convention, it is illegal if you're involved in a conflict to attack civilians or to use weapons that kill civilians. What you're supposed to do when you're involved in a war is you have to attack the opposing army and you have to attack them with weapons that kill the opposing army. You don't attack civilians. Nuclear weapons, they are the most indiscriminate weapons ever created by man. They kill everybody. International Court of Justice voted that they're illegal. Not the use of them, the possession of them. Illegal. And why is it illegal to possess them? Because our nuclear weapons are first strike nuclear weapons. Our nuclear weapons are the retaliatory nuclear weapons. Don't listen to anybody who says to you, oh, we need our nuclear weapons in case somebody attacks us. Rubbish. Our nuclear weapons are first strike nuclear weapons. That's how they can be used. That's the only way they can be used. We'd have to attack somebody first. Brothers and sisters, see if we attack somebody with nuclear weapons. The game's a bogey. The planet's finished. Why the hell would we possess illegal, immoral, scrap bloody metal and spend 130 billion on it when we can spend it instead on schools and hospitals and teachers and doctors? That's what we should be doing with 130 billion pounds. Just in case you want the detail, when it was estimated, it's went up. When it was estimated it was going to be 100 billion pounds to renew Trident, it's now 130. When it was estimated 100 billion, Scotland's share of that was 2,125 million pounds. That was our share. What could you get for that? Well, how about 5 brand new hospitals? How about 100 new doctors? How about 100 new dentists? How about 10 brand new secondary schools? How about 200 new teachers? How about building 30 new sports centres? How about hosting the Commonwealth Games? How about dualling the A96 Inverness to Aberdeen Road? How about dualling the A9 Perth to Inverness Road? How about doing all of that? All of it? Or renew Trident? You've got the freedom. You've got the freedom in your hands to decide, this wee country, Scotland, we are going to stand up across the world and declare for peace. Declare for nuclear disarmament. We're going to give encouragement to all those starving wains in the world. I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely sick to the back teeth of your Live Aids, of your red nose campaigns, of your celebrities clicking their fingers and telling you every 4 seconds a Wayne dies of malnutrition. Wayne's dying of dysentery, cholera, diarrhoea, dying because they can't afford mosquito nets. Brothers and sisters, why, oh why is it? There's never enough money on this planet to feed bloody Waynes, but there's always enough money for bombs and missiles and wars. Why is it? This wee country, Scotland could be on the planet here saying loud and clear, no, we reject that idea. We reject the idea there's enough money for bombs, but not enough money for burns. We want to invest in schools and hospitals and teachers and dentists. We want to create jobs. What happens? What happens when you build new hospitals? What happens when you build new schools? What happens when you build new roads? You create jobs, thousands of jobs. And when you create jobs, what happens? People spend their money. They spend their money locally. And when they spend their money locally, the services and the goods that are getting supplied locally, there's big demand for it. So the people that are supplying them, they create jobs as well. It's a win-win situation. That's the freedom you've got on the 18th of September. The freedom to decide no to nuclear weapons, yes to more schools and hospitals, teachers and doctors. You've got the freedom to decide that the mail service is such an important service that it should remain in public hands. That the idea that there should be thousands of job losses and that the price of sending a letter or a package is going to increase, because that's what's going to happen. Because they've already voted to privatise the mail service. Don't know if you saw the story, George Osborne's mate. He went to school, well, £12 million he made in 3 weeks. £12 million in the sell-off of Royal Mail. How? Because he was given preferred bidder status. So the Tories sold it at a song, and then 3 weeks later, one of his mates makes £12 million. All right, if you can get it, eh? That's the decisions they've already made. And yet, the white paper, which has already been produced, gives a commitment to public health, gives a commitment to keeping education free, gives a commitment to keeping the mail service in public hands, gives a commitment to getting rid of nuclear weapons, gives a commitment to fighting for a living wage instead of a minimum wage. By the way, why is it? Why is it that we, ordinary people, continue to subsidise the Morrisons, the Asdas, the Tesco's of the world? Why is it that these companies that make billions of pounds profit every single year pay their workers poverty pay, and the worker then goes to the social and says, I need housing benefit, I need working families tax credit because my wages are so low I can't afford my rent? And then these companies think, no problem, the taxpayer will pick up the tab, we can laugh all the way to the bank. See, in an independent Scotland, brothers and sisters, I want to say to the Tesco's and the Asdas, I want to say to the Morrisons, I want to say to the Amazons, I want to say to the Boots, I want to say to the Googles, I want to say to them, we're going to introduce legislation that means you're going to have to pay decent pay to ordinary workers instead of poverty pay in an independent Scotland. We want some dignity in employment. The figures were released yesterday to show that we've had a massive increase in poverty here in Scotland. Now almost 1 million people in poverty. They're now saying, by the way, it used to be a scandal when they said that 1 in 4 Waynes are growing up in poor households. Now they're saying it's as much as 60%. 60%. I don't know about you, but see, every time I see one of these stickers, UK OK, I don't think it's okay to have nearly 1 million people in Scotland living in poverty. I don't think it's okay to have 500,000 families in Britain relying on bloody food banks for existence. I don't think it's okay to pick up the Evening Times as I did 3 weeks ago and find 4,000 Waynes a day in Glasgow, a day, relying on food banks. I don't think that's okay. I think it's a damn disgrace. That's what I think it is. A damn disgrace. And we've got the chance to do something about it. Because see that white paper that I talked about? That's not what you're voting for. You're not voting for the white paper on 18th of September. That's just what the SNP government wants to do. That's just the start. By the way, see if you leave this meeting with no other message in your ears, please leave with this message in your ears. Independence is not a destination. Independence is just the start of the journey. The start of the journey, brothers and sisters. The start of the journey to transform Scotland from a poverty-paying backwater with wains reliant on food banks, with services that are getting slashed left, right and centre. Transform Scotland into a high-wage economy with high-quality services, where we invest in our elderly, we invest in our children, we look across the water instead of looking down at Westminster, instead of looking down there at the payday loan companies, instead of looking down there at the food banks, we look here at the Finlands, the Denmarks, the Swedens and Norways. We look at the high wages, the first-class public services. We look at that way of life instead of that way of life. We look up, no down. That's what we can do in an independent Scotland. You've got the choice here. You can go down the roads of the Gordon Browns of the world. You know, Gordon and his wee sidekick Alistair Darling, they're now getting mobilised to tell you it's going to be a dark future if you go for independence. Oh, I'll tell you what, it's a pity they couldn't see into the future in 2008 when they were running the bloody country, innit? They can see into the future now apparently, but not then. Here's your man Gordon Brown talking about independence. And he says that we should reject independence because the UK, this is the key, this is the nub here of why you have to vote no. The UK is defined by a unique pooling and sharing of risks and resources. That's what the UK is defined by, according to Gordon. And by the way, you know, he was ex-Prime Minister, he comes from Fife and all that, you know, he must know what he's talking about. A unique pooling and sharing of risks and resources. That's what the UK is defined by. Let's start with risks, Gordon. Let's ask Gordon, how many pensioners in Fife? How many health workers in Fife? How many local authority workers in Fife were responsible for the economic mess that got visited upon us in 2008 and it's forced us into bankruptcy? How many? Absolutely none. Absolutely none. Well, if it isn't the pensioners' fault, and isn't the health workers' fault, isn't the local authority workers' fault, why the hell are they being expected to pay for the economic mess? Austerity. Austerity, brothers and sisters, quite clearly, is the punishing of the poor for the mistakes of the rich. That's what austerity is all about. Unique pooling and sharing of risks. Who was responsible for the problem? The bankers. The politicians who let the bankers walk all over them. Deregulated the financial sector. Let them take the PISS out of the society. By the way, just for anybody, that's not a financial term, that's just pish. Unique sharing of risks. Just in case you were happy when you came to the meeting tonight, let me put a dampener on it for you. MPs who got us into the economic mess, who are now telling you that we're on it together, we've got to pull the resources. MPs whose basic pay is £65,000 a year, their expenses £100,000. How many of you in your work get a weekly grocery allowance? 160 quid a week. 160 quid a week. You wouldn't believe it, would you? That's what they get, a weekly grocery allowance. Every single train they go on, every single bus they go on, every single plane they go on gets paid. Every single hotel they stay in gets paid. And they get to purchase flats in London and repay the interest on the mortgage. By the way, guess what happens when they lose their seat or they move on? They get to keep the flat. That's what happens. We pay the mortgage, they get to sell the flat. You wouldn't believe it. These shower of political space cadets have now voted themselves an 11% wage rise. We're on it together, by the way. We're all pulling our belts. 11% wage rise. They can't even afford 1% for health workers. 11% for MPs. The bankers who got us into the mess. Bonuses are now higher than they were before 2008. Bankers' bonuses are now higher than before the economic crash. Unique sharing of risks. My arse. What about, maybe, okay. What about the resources then? Maybe there is a unique pooling and sharing of the resources. Let's look at that one. Let's look at Oxfam here, that have produced a report. First year of the condemned government. A condemned government with 29 members of a cabinet. 29 members of a cabinet. 23 of them personal millionaires. 23 personal millionaires in the cabinet. How representative is that of society? 23 millionaires sitting in governance. You never voted for them, by the way. Scotland never voted for them, but we got them. We got them because that's the lack of freedom I talked about earlier. These are the people, by the way. These are the people who on the 1st of April sat round their wee cabinet table, these millionaires, coming for their 14-bedroom stately homes. Most of them private landlords. Most of them with a portfolio of properties that rip the arse out the housing benefit bill every single year. And they sat round that wee table and they said, what can we do to save money in the housing benefit bill? Well, we can't cap rents because then we would lose money. What we'll do is we'll attack the housing benefit claimants. What we'll do is anybody that's in a council house or a housing association house and their kids have got their own bedrooms, we'll punish them. How dare the working class have their kids getting brought up in separate bedrooms? Get them to share bedrooms. That's what's good enough for them. We'll cut their housing benefit. We'll introduce the bedroom tax. That's what they did. The 1st of April. Because we're on at the Gillan. It's austerity. The same week that that bunch of cretins did that, on the 5th of April, they introduced a tax cut. 5 pence in the pound for the millionaires. For the millionaires. 13,000 millionaires in Britain got a 5 pence tax cut from 50 pence in the pound to 45 pence in the pound. Those 13,000 millionaires now pay £100,000 a year less in tax than they did last year. We're all in it together. Bedroom tax for the poor, tax cuts for the millionaires. A unique pooling and sharing of resources. That report from Oxfam makes the point that after 1 year of this government, the number of people who have been forced into poverty has increased by 900,000. 900,000. 300,000 on wains. 300,000 wains. 90% of the 600,000 adults are workers. People in employment. Remember that old myth? Oh, the way out of poverty, get a job. I'm sorry. The way out of poverty isn't to get a job if you're getting poverty bloody pay. It's a way into poverty, not out of poverty. 900,000 extra. They've called it speeded up Thatcherism. Oxfam have described the condemned government's welfare and benefit cuts as speeded up Thatcherism. And here's the rub. Here's the rub for any of you out there that's thinking, oh, I'm not sure about voting yes. Here's the rub. Oxfam make the point that so far across the UK, they've only implemented 40% of the cuts that they've already announced. 60% of the cuts have still to be implemented. And the worst years are going to be 2015 to 2016, where the number of people in poverty is going to increase by another million. That's the reality. That's the reality. Unique pooling and sharing of resources. Oh, wait a wee minute. Let's look for the wee report for Dr. Beresford. Philip Beresford. Some of you might have seen it yourselves. This is a guy who's done the rich list since 1985. This guy's compiled the rich list, the richest 1,000 people in the UK since 1985. He's compiled how much wealth they've got. In the last year, the richest 1,000 people in Britain have now accumulated a wealth total of £519 billion. 519,000 million pounds between 1,000 people. It's grotesque. Absolutely grotesque. Here's what he said. He said, I've never seen such a phenomenal rise in personal wealth as the growth in the fortunes of Britain's 1,000 richest people over the past year. He goes on to say, the richest people in Britain have had an astonishing year. An astonishing year. 900,000 more people in poverty. The rich have had an astonishing year. Unique pooling and sharing of resources. Gordon Brown, you're talking crap. Gordon Brown, you're out of touch with reality. You're out of touch with the reality of ordinary life for ordinary people. We have a choice here, brothers and sisters, on the 18th of September. We have the choice to stay on the bus that's headed towards more poverty, more low pay, more inequality, more nuclear weapons, more payday loan companies, more food banks. That's where that bus is headed. Or you can get off the bus. You can get off the bus and say, no, we're doing something different. Here in Scotland, we believe in public services. Here in Scotland, we believe in such a thing as society. We believe in looking after the elderly. We believe in looking after the kids. We believe in investing in good quality public services. I'll tell you a wee story. As an MSP, been invited to speak to Fetis College. Some of you might have heard of Fetis. Some of you might have even been there, I don't know. Be very well off if you were. It's one of the top fee-paying schools, not just in Scotland but in Britain. I was invited to Fetis a few years ago. I was invited to give my brand of independent socialist Scotland. I was like a circus act, you know. Bring in the elephant, see if he can stand on one leg, you know. All these wee toffee-nosed wains, Ma's and Dad's millionaires, 300 of them turned up. So I gave my speech about how an independent socialist Scotland would redistribute wealth, would share out the resources, everybody would have a higher standard of living. And they listened politely, and then this wee boy at the end, he stood up and he said, Mr. Sheridan, isn't it the case that in your independent Scotland that you talk about, you would close down Fetis College? And I said to him, well, listen, I've checked out your curriculum choice. 44 subjects the kids can choose. 44 subjects. Average class size, 15. Every one of them, personal tutors. Playing fields, the envy of a Premier League football team. I says, no, on the contrary. Seeing an independent socialist Scotland, I don't want to close down Fetis. I want to open up Fetis to all the wains that get the same type of education. Why don't we in an independent Scotland have lower class sizes, have more teachers, have better sports facilities? Why don't we in an independent Scotland take elderly care out of the hands of the private profiteers and bring it back where it belongs, in the public sector, so that elderly relatives and parents are getting properly looked after instead of getting ripped off by people that are getting paid poverty pay by privateers? Brothers and sisters, I've got to say to you, my vision of an independent Scotland, it might not be yours. That's the beauty of this particular campaign. It's a grassroots campaign. We've all got our own visions, we've all got our own priorities. We share one common goal: Scotland's freedom. But you might have a different vision of that freedom. Me, I want an independent Scotland so that we never, ever again, have the scandal of one single pensioner anywhere in Scotland dying prematurely of hypothermia because they can't afford to heat their houses. I don't want that happening in Scotland. And I'll tell you the way we'll tackle it. We will do in an independent Scotland what the Labour Party failed to do in 13 years of power. We'll take back the gas and the electricity in public hands. That's what we should have done. In an independent Scotland, I want us to own the oil. I want us not to have a Bank of England having any say in our money supply or interest rates. I want an independently, publicly owned Scottish bank with a Scottish currency. That's what I want in independent Scotland. We can debate it. We can discuss it. That's all irrelevant unless we vote yes. I'll tell you what else. Independent Scotland. I want us never, ever to be humiliated as a nation the way we were 23rd of October last year. 23rd of October last year, BBC News headline. The nation awaits the decision of one man. That one man was a Texan billionaire called Jim Ratcliffe. Jim Ratcliffe is the owner of Ineos, the Grangemouth oil refinery. The Grangemouth oil refinery is the very heart of the Scottish economy. Without that refinery, Scotland's economy doesn't operate. The very heart. And the workers in that refinery, who hadn't had a wage rise for 5 years, had the temerity to ask for a wage rise. And this Texan billionaire, who lives in a £120 million yacht, so he doesn't pay taxes in any country in the world. The press and the media have a go at single parents, people in benefit. They call them scroungers. They're not the scroungers. It's the tax dodging billionaires that are the scroungers, brothers and sisters. No ordinary people. And this man decided that he was going to lock the gates of the Grangemouth refinery, close it down. He held this country to ransom. What did the workers have to do? The members of Unite, the trade union, they had to sign up for a 3-year pay freeze. They had to sign up for a 3-year no strike deal. What is a no strike deal? What does it mean? It means you've lost your human right to withdraw your labour power. It's a human right. They had to give it up. They had to agree to give up the final salary pension. Some of them had paid into it for 25 years. And they had to stand there and watch as the elected shop stewards were sacked and sent out to the factory. That was total and utter humiliation for that union. But it was total and utter humiliation for this country as well. Brothers and sisters, 19th of September, when we voted yes, I want a delegation of those Unite workers to be given a wee speedboat by the Scottish Government with a letter. And I want them to go out to that yacht and I want them to tell Jim Ratcliffe, get out of Scotland, we're taking over the Grangemouth refinery. Never again will we allow ourselves to be held to ransom. That's the type of thing we can do in an independent Scotland. People think, oh, but Tommy, can we afford it? Are we really big enough? Are we really strong enough? Are we really financially capable? We've been told for decades. We're not good enough. Brothers and sisters, for 33 years in a row, no 3 or 4 or 5, 33 years in a row, Scotland, this wee country of ours, has paid more into the exchequer of Westminster than we've got back from them. We're no junkies, subsidy junkies, as Boris Buffoon Johnson would have you believe down in London. Calling Scots subsidy junkies. We're no subsidy junkies. We're net contributors to the UK economy. That's a fact. We have got a situation where, per head of the population, tax and revenue generated in England's £9,000 per head. In Scotland, tax and revenue generation, £10,700 per head. We are more capable to stand on our own feet as an independent nation than any of the 100 and odd countries since the Second World War that have secured their independence from imperialist nations. And by the way, many of those countries, to secure their independence, had to pick up the stone or the bullet. We only have to pick up a wee pencil. A wee pencil and score an X against yes. And we can have our independence and we can do things differently. Brothers and sisters, I ask you to reject the scaremongering, the doom and gloom of the Bitter Together campaign. Project Fear that tries to tell you you're no big enough, no good enough, no wise enough, no smart enough. We are all those things, but we just have to realise it. This tour that I'm doing is called Hope Over Fear. Nelson Mandela, one of the greatest politicians that ever lived, once said, "May your life's choices be guided by hope, not by fear." I'm asking each and every one of you to think in your hearts, in your heads, what type of country is it that you want the Waynes to grow up in? What type of country is it that you want your grandchildren to be born into? I want you to think for a moment, those of you who are more mature in the audience, who've got grandkids, maybe 7, 8, 9 years of age, 10 years from now. 10 years from now, Scotland's voted no. Scotland's voted no, and their grandwains are now 17, 18, 19. They've grown up in a Scotland that's even darker than it is now. They've grown up in a Scotland where the health service has been privatised. Education services now beyond their reach. They can't afford to go to uni. Job opportunities are even worse. Housing shortages even worse. They're asking you, as their granda, can you help them immigrate to somewhere else? Because there's nothing for them in Scotland. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, "Granda, how did you vote? How did you vote in the day of the big referendum?" And if you voted no, you're going to realise by then that you made a humongous mistake. You made an enormous error of judgment. You're going to look at that Wayne and you're going to feel awful uncomfortable. And you're going to say, "I voted no." And that Wayne's going to look at you with bemusement. Going to stare into your eyes and say, "Granda, why? Why did you vote no?" And you're going to shift in your feet and you're going to say, "I didn't like Alex Salmond." And that Wayne's going to say to you, "Who? Who?" That's how unimportant Alex Salmond is, or any other politician is, to this question, brothers and sisters. You've got the chance here to realise the potential of a sleeping giant. Scotland has the resources. Not only the oil and the gas, by the way, not just the oil and gas in the North Sea, the oil and gas in the West Coast that's been undrilled, where they believe that there's even more there than there is in the North Sea, but they've refused to allow it to be explored and extracted. Why? Because it's in the shipping line of Trident. Well, see, when you get rid of Trident, we don't need to worry about that any longer. But we don't want to invest just in oil and gas. We also want to invest in clean energy production. We've got 25% of the whole of Europe's resources to generate wind, wave and solar power, to develop the turbines, to develop the skills required to harness that, to export it to the world. Scotland will be known not just as a country of peace, but a country of clean energy production as well. That's the potential we've got, brothers and sisters. I'm going to ask each and every one of you to have the courage, to have the vision, to have the wisdom to stand up and be counted on the 18th of September. Don't just vote for your future. Vote for the future of your Waynes and your Grandwaynes. and let's allow this country not only to be free, but to become a better nation that invests in its people, that invests in real public services. A country we could all be proud of. Brothers and sisters, stand up and be counted. Vote yes on the 18th of September. Thanks very much.
Okay, folks.